Era como estar en el tramontanes, por favor. Y la subida que consiguió, no subía al metro cuando iba con el niño, porque estaba como... Oye, ahora sí que no podían hacer una foto.
They're shaped deliberately this way because it was easier to roll them over the tracks with the help of wooden bars. We are surrounded by the rock salt, so the walls, this is rock salt. It's not only sodium chloride, so NaCl, but also other minerals and impurities. So the color is like green or gray, and it doesn't resemble the table salt that we know from our kitchen. Our mine is altogether 9 levels. The deepest point in the mine is 327 meters on the 9th level. The deepest point for us today is the 3rd level and 135 meters. Today we get to visit different chambers. You also have a chance to see underground chapels, underground artificial lakes. You will learn about mining techniques, about the extraction of salt, horizontal and vertical transport, a little bit of geology and history. Our mine was also recognized by the UNESCO and was placed on the first World Heritage List by UNESCO in 1978. It's also a World Heritage Site. All right, so let's continue. Follow me, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I will open the door, so please pass the door to the next person, and the last person is kindly requested to close the door. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now we entered the so-called air lock, and this is part of the artificial ventilation system. The basic rule is to open just one door at a time. So before we open the front door, we need to close the back one. Otherwise, the circulation of air would be disturbed. And now it's easy to do. So that's the magic gentlemen, we entered the first chamber on the first route. It's called the Ursula chamber from the 17th century. And when miners stopped the extraction of salt in a particular place, they had to build protective structures to secure the ceiling and the walls, because empty cavities on the ground were prone to collapses. And wood was the best material for that, because it was plentiful in the old days, and also thanks to its flexibility, it counteracted the pressure of the rottenness well. It was also well preserved in a salty air, so it was a perfect material for the salt mine. Here you can see examples of wooden casings that were built by the miners to secure the ceiling and the walls, and it was the first securing method used by the miners. Now, if you take a few steps forward, on your right-hand side, you can see another part of the lift. It's called over-the-shaft structure, with two rollers that change the direction of the ropes from vertical to horizontal. And in a moment, just round the corner, we'll see the main part of the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main part of the lift. It's called the manual cross. It consists of a vertical rope drum, and there are 4 handles. So miners were going in circles and pushing those handles. Ropes were rolled onto the drum, and thanks to this movement, the salt out was taken out of the mine. In most cases, those devices are original, which means that they were once used by the miners, and later miners just left them behind. If you look to your right-hand side, there is also part of the original corridor that was once used by the miners. It's much lower and narrower, because miners usually moved in a half-bent position, either pulling something or pushing something. They also extracted the salt with the use of very simple tools, like pickaxes, hammers, and wedges. So they extracted the huge blocks of salt from the walls and from the floors. Later on, those blocks were divided into smaller parts and formed into cylinders with the help of pickaxes. So during this process, a lot of crushed and powdered salt was also produced. This salt was also packed into barrels and taken out of the mine. You can also see the border marks here, and every single time the salt output was taken out of the mine, it had to be marked on the board by the foreman. So it was like an ancient calculator. Sometimes people joke that this is the number of tourists that got lost in the mine, but it's not true. Okay, let's continue on, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we entered the chamber dedicated to Nicholas Copernicus, famous Polish astronomer and scientist. Copernicus was famous for his heliocentric theory of the universe, so he proved that the sun is in the center of the universe. This sculpture made of rock salt was placed here to commemorate the 500th anniversary of his birthday. Copernicus was also a student at the Krakow Academy, and he's believed to be one of the first visitors to our mine. In this chamber, you can also see other secondary methods used by the miners. So you've already seen this one, a wooden casing, but there is also a crypt structure over there, and wall made of salt bricks here. Now, if you do not watch to taste the walls, to check if it's a real salt, you could use a different method. For example, the light, because salt is translucent, which means that the light shines through the salt crystals, so it's easy to tell salt from other stones. And as you can see, even the floor here is made of salt tiles. You can check with your own torches. So the floor, as well as the sculpture, is made of rock salt. Different from the previous one. Well, does it resemble anything? Well done. Perfect answer. Yeah, this is the cauliflower salt, because salt resembles this vegetable. And as you can see, it's white or yellowish, but here is also a good place to show you how iron is affected by NaCl in the salt mine, because in contact with NaCl it corrodes. So the color is like orange here because of rust. So please do not taste this one. Okay, let's continue. Moment, please. Wieliczka Salt Mine. They do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah?
I don't think they were going to
Ladies and gentlemen, we entered the chamber called the burnt, and the name refers to one of the dangers that miners encounter during the work, danger of fire. Because when miners started to extract salt, a very dangerous gas was released from the rock mass. It's methane, CH4. It has very specific properties because it's lighter than the air, so it usually accumulates under the ceiling. It's colorless and odorless. It's also explosive. So you can see figure composition with miners wearing wet clothes to protect their bodies from the flames, who crawled into the chambers with long holes in the fire at the end to check if there was methane, because there were no gas detectors at that time. So I'll turn on the presentation to show you how the web looked like. There'll be a sound of explosion, but don't worry, it's just a prototype. The mining of salt in 1996, and we also have artificial ventilation system here and air conditioning, so we're safe. And as we've burnt out the methane, we can carry on with our tour, so please follow me. And mind your hats, because the curtain is quite warm. So you check out. Ladies and gentlemen, this exhibition is dedicated to the horizontal transport in the mine. As I mentioned at the beginning, all the work was done manually. So miners extracted huge blocks of salt from the walls and from the floors. Later on, those blocks were divided into smaller parts and formed into cylinders. So miners used sledges like one over that to pull either the cylinders of salt or the barrels with crushed or powder salt. Later on, mining carts helped them with the transport, and they moved along wooden tracks. And from the 16th century, horses facilitated both the horizontal and vertical transport in the mine. The problem with the horses was that they needed to stay in the mine for longer periods, because lowering them every single day into the mine was dangerous and also time-consuming. So miners created underground stables, and there was a group of miners dedicated just to take care of the horses. In a moment, in the next chamber, you will see the reconstruction of the underground stable, as well as one of the devices that was powered by the horses. In the 20th century, of course, different types of locomotives were used for horizontal transport, and in the corridor you can see the rails that were also used for horizontal transport by the miners. Okay, let's continue. Please.
There's one down here, but
Ladies and gentlemen, we entered the chamber dedicated to Kinga the Great. I'll tell you about the king in a moment, but here you can see on the left-hand side the reconstruction of the underground stable. As I mentioned, the horses facilitated both the horizontal and vertical transport in the mine in the 16th century. Of course, you can also see forms of secondary crystallization here, so over there are examples of salt cauliflowers, and over there on the ceiling as well. And sometimes when miners left some equipment behind, after some time, the hidden air, the equipment was also covered with salt, like a bucket, huge barrel, or ladder. And horses powered machines like the one on the other side. It's called a horse gear. It consists of a vertical road drum, but in comparison to the manual crossing, it's much bigger. Rows go horizontally. There is over the shaft structure that changes the direction of the rows, so horizontal to vertical. And if you come closer to the showcase, I'll just turn on the presentation to show you how this machine worked. So every single time the salt out was taken out of the mine, the second rope acted like a counterbalance. So for example, it lowered wood for protective structures. Here you can see how it goes up and down the shaft. And thanks to this machine, much bigger salt loads could be taken out of the mine. You get examples here, and they sometimes weigh even up to 2 tons. Of course, later on, those machines were replaced by steam engines and lifts powered by electricity in the 20th century. As I mentioned, this chamber is dedicated to King Kazimierz the Great, great Polish ruler and legislator. This sculpture made of rock salt depicting the king was placed here to commemorate the first ordination of mining issued by King Kazimierz in 1368. It was the first set of rules and privileges for the miners, in other words, the first mining law at that time. King Kazimierz was also the owner of the salt industry, and during his reign it was a very important source of revenue because it constituted 1/3 of the royal treasury income at that time. If you visited Krakow, for example, you probably heard about the district called Kazimierz. So this district was named after King Kazimierz. Okay, we will continue, so hold on, please. Ladies and gentlemen, the mining of rock salt in Wieliczka started in the 13th century, but much earlier, 6,000 years ago, people of Neolithic tribes who settled in this area noticed that the surface springs were salty. So they started to collect the water and boil it over the fire. When water evaporated, white substance was left at the bottom of clay containers. It was the first evaporated salt, or in other words, the first production of salt in this place 6,000 years ago. And we know that thanks to archaeological excavations that were carried out in this place, so archaeologists found here the remains of clay containers that were used for boiling and briquetting of salt. Of course, later on, when the surface springs started to disappear, people needed to look for salty water deeper, and they started to dig wells, and that's how they encountered the deposit of rock salt we're visiting today. Salt was also a very important source of revenue, and it was used for transactions, so it was like the method of payment. And for example, Roman soldiers were paid in salt deposit instead of money. It was called in Latin salarium. It refers to the English word salary, like an equivalent of money. Okay, let's continue forward, please. Evaporated salt beds was formed. So markers encountered not only rock salt, but also other types of stones, like clay stones or sandstones. This is also the last chamber on the first level. In a moment we will go down the stairs to reach the upper part of the second level. You also have a chance to see original steps carved by the miners in the rock salt, and they were used by them to carry the salt out from the bottom part of the chamber here to the first level. On the right hand side, another example of the manual cross. People already seen this device, but this time it's just a reconstruction, and usually those machines worked over the blind shaft. There is a blind shaft over that, and what's the basic difference between a blind shaft and a shaft? Blind shafts were much smaller, and they just connected levels in the mine, while the shafts connected the mine with the surface. We'll take the stairs, so please mind your steps, and on your right hand side you'll see other examples of salt, stalactites and stalagmites. Follow me, please. This part of the chamber up to the first level. There was steep slippery, there wasn't any handrail, and you need to remember that it was much darker because there was no electricity. So miners would just open fire to light the furnace in the caverns. The very first lamps were made of clay and they were powered by animal fats, so they didn't give much light. As you can see, the shape of this chamber is quite unique and irregular because miners also didn't have any plans of excavation, so they basically followed the purest ways of salt. If you watch The Lord of the Rings, sometimes you may feel here as if you were in the mines of Moria, but fortunately we don't have orcs and goblins here, so we are safe. We just have dwarves, but I will tell you about them later on. And in this chamber you can also see another sacred method used by the miners. It's the latest one in mining. It's called the anchoring technique, and those are the rock bolts. You can actually touch a ripple here. Rock bolts that are several meters long, and they are pasted into the rock mass with an epoxy glue. So this is the latest method. We'll learn about other methods later on as well. So please mind your steps and follow me. Because when miners started to extract salt, fresh water enters the mine immediately. And why is it so dangerous? Because fresh water dissolves the salt walls of the ceiling. So it was the cause of underground collapses and subsidence of the ground. So miners had to collect the water and pump it out of the mine. They used very simple things like wooden pipes like the one here, wooden tunnels like the one over there, and they collected the water in wooden tanks. And later on, with the help of fresh pumps, they pumped the water between the levels and then back to the surface. Water was then transferred to the salt works and evaporated there, so evaporated salt was also produced. Even nowadays, we have underground water in a salt mine. This water is collected and pumped out of the mine, but it cannot be dumped to the streams because it's not ecologically friendly. So this water is transferred to the utilization plant and evaporated there. So we can still get evaporated salt from Wieliczka in the shops, but just evaporated salt from underground, fully saturated salt water. We stopped the mining of salt in 1996. Of course, nowadays we use different types of pumps, not like the one over there. They are electric ones because they are more effective, yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and we reached the depth of 90 meters. So now we are 90 meters deep and we'll continue to follow the rigs. Ladies and gentlemen, we entered the so-called dwarfs chamber. It's connected with the legends about dwarfs who helped miners during the work. So this figural composition presents dwarfs at work, so they perform different types of mining professions, like mining carpenter, mining crusher, the holder, the foreman. And they were believed to take over the shifts, especially at night, and work for the miners. Sometimes they were of course mischievous, they played tricks on miners. And unfortunately, you cannot see the Snow White here because it's a totally different story. Yes. Okay. Continue. ladies and gentlemen, we entered the first chapel on the tourist route. It's called the Holy Cross Chapel. On one side, they've got a wooden sculpture of Christ on the cross. On the other side, there was a wooden sculpture of Our Lady with an infant. And here, two sculptures made of rock salt depicting two kneeling monks. But as you can see, they heavily dissolved because those sculptures were taken from different parts of the mine from the times when there was no artificial ventilation and no air conditioning. So they were heavily affected by the humid air. But why miners created such places? Of course, working in a salt mine was never a punishment. It was a privilege to work here because miners also had some privileges. For example, they could take a few handfuls of salt every single day and later on sell it on the market. So it was like an additional salary for them. But if we take into account working conditions, they were quite unusual. Because first of all, it was underground. It was dark here. The danger of water, the danger of fire, underground collapses and subsidence of the ground. Also a very hot and humid place. So we wouldn't call it the perfect workplace. So miners created underground places of worship because they usually started their shifts with either prayers or the holy service. And this is just an introduction to the place you're about to see in a moment. One of the biggest underground chapels in the world, dedicated to Saint Kinga, patron saint of the salt miners. You remember Princess Kinga from the legend. Okay, let's continue. Follow, please. Kinga's chapel, chapel dedicated to the patron saint of the salt miners. Just to give you a few numbers, how impressive it is, it's 55 meters long, 20 meters wide, and up to 12 meters high. All the sculptures decorated elements downstairs were carved in rock salt. They were created by 3 minor sculptors, but also a number of helpers. The process of decoration took almost 70 years because it was started in 1895 and completed in 1963 because miners usually worked after the regular shifts, so in their free time. They mostly go down the stairs to reach the bottom part. These mighty steps, because the stairs are also made of rock salt, so they might be slippery. We'll just go around the chapel. I'll tell you more about the sculptures in the chapel, and later I'll give you a minute or two to take some pictures and have a little bit of individual sightseeing. So let's continue following the please. These mighty stairs. Part of the chapel, and the depth here is 100 meters, and all those sculptures and bas reliefs that surround us present the scenes from Jesus' life according to New Testament. So over there you have a nativity scene with baby Jesus made of orange salt. Actually, this orange salt is not from our mine because in our mine we just have like green or gray salts, and this orange salt was taken from a different mine, but also in Poland. 2 sculptures presenting the judgment of Herod and here the massacre of the innocent. If we take a few steps forward, we've got 2 side altars. On your right hand side, the side altar of Our Lady, and on the other side, the side altar of Resurrection. Chandeliers in the chapel are decorated with halite crystals, so this is the purest form of rock salt. If we take a few steps forward, stop for a moment, taking picture, yes. So, on your right hand side, two scenes from Jesus' childhood life. So the first one, titled The Flight to Egypt, and the one over there, 12-year-old Jesus preaching in a temple. In the main part of the chapel, there is a high altar dedicated to Saint Kinga, with the figure of Saint Kinga in the center, also carved in rock salt. In the older mansas, we also have the relics here, the relics of Saint Kinga and the relics of our Pope John Paul II. On the other side, three scenes from Jesus' adult life. So the first one, titled The Miracle in the Cana of Galilee, the most famous one, inspired by Leonardo da Vinci fresco, The Last Supper, and the third sculpture was that titled Doubting Thomas. Now I'll give you a minute to take some pictures to have a little bit of individual sightseeing. Now I will be to go over that by the sculpture John Paul II, so I'll just raise my hand and we'll leave, okay? So you can take some pictures now.
A?
Masz tam jak krzesło na focie.
This was the chamber with an artificial fountain of the lake and a salt mine. The lake is not 9 meters deep and it contains dry, so this fully saturated salt water doesn't affect the salt walls. The side of the lake, for example, the secondary crystallization, so once again, the salt on the water side. No sea life here because it's too salty. It's like a dead sea, so you can't swim, you can't dive, you will just float on the surface because it's fully saturated. You can also see here another secondary method used by the miners. In the center of the top, there's a salt pillar that is left with the river sitting back in walls, while on the other side where the rock wall is placed, you can see the techniques that combine this chain. And now we're going to do a tour, but we're going in the opposite direction, and we'll take the stairs. is also the highest chamber on the tourist route. It's 36 meters high, and in the past, some spectacular events were organized here. Once there was the first underground hot air balloon flight, and the first underground bungee jumping was very similar. It happened because of the spring faces and the great guys where they used to breakfast. They mentioned the beginning of the recognized by the UNESCO, which was like the first World Heritage List by UNESCO, along with the central part of Krakow. So there is a sign of UNESCO over there as well. And this is actually the place where tourists coming to an end. So thank you very much for your attention. It was my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the tour of me. As a little token of appreciation, you may also leave a tip if you wish, but now I need to give you further instruction on what to do next. So please come closer to this map and just tell me what to do. So ladies and gentlemen, now we have this infrastructure chamber, and you have a chance to buy some souvenirs here. There is a gift shop. But there are a few more chambers to visit, and you can do it without my supervision. It's not possible to get lost here because it's just one way, so the corridor is this way. And from this way, you can just straight ahead. On the right,
There's an open bar, they have like a really